Hi, I'm Sarah and I'm the CEO of Dynamic Boards, and today I'm speaking with Charlotte Valeur. Hello, Charlotte.
Hi, Sarah. I'm
And
delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
yeah, great to have you. I met Charlotte last year, I think it was, and you're a real role model for me, Charlotte. Charlotte has been on 8 public company boards. She's had 3 public board chair roles, and she was chair of the Institute of Directors. She really has been around a lot of different boards, has an awful lot of experience, and has a real passion to give that back as well and to develop other non-execs. So maybe just to start off, Charlotte, I'd love you to tell us a bit about how you think your thinking might have been different along the way.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I do think my thinking has been different when I realized that my thinking is different. When I, some 5 years ago, realized that I'm autistic. It was a bit of a journey to realize that we have a lot of autistic people within my family. So it wasn't something I wasn't, aware of in a broader sense, but I actually didn't really recognize it in myself. I could then look back and look at all the situations that shows me that I was different since I was a very young girl and didn't do so well in school and didn't really have any friends. And so there was a different way of thinking of what's important. And I think in the boardroom, I tend to see patterns in everything. So behaviors, numbers, everything gets turned into sequences of patterns. So just recently I was sitting, when I listen to something, it suddenly starts coming into certain patterns. And I was looking around the roaring 20s in the last century, for example, which happened after the Spanish flu, and how there was this whole huge party going on throughout the 20s until 29, of course, where they had a crash. And I'm thinking, are we going through the same thing? This is all feeling a bit familiar. And if you look at some of this, you can actually straight away see patterns through the 20s, where now we're saying we're having a post-pandemic boom and everything is going to go wow. And then maybe, we go into the 30s after that. What comes after that? We're having a shift in technology where we will have automation and people start losing jobs. So we'll have increased unemployment and blah, blah, blah. And I thought history is going to repeat itself if we are not trying to change the patterns. Yeah. And so this is then where my thinking comes in the boardroom as well, where how we look at risks, for example. I was a stock exchange trader back in the 80s. And I've been trained in risk since I was in my 20s, and risk moves every second. It's not something you pull out of the cupboard once a year and then stick back in again. Yeah. It's constantly moving. And we did a risk exercise, and in terms of measuring risk in impact and likelihood. And I was very high out, like 2 degrees out to impact to all the other board members in that exercise. And they were like, oh, you're risk averse. I said, I'm not risk averse. I'm just seeing what impact. Let's talk about what we see on each of the top 10 risks. And I had about, 10 different impacts, and they had about 5 on average. But when they saw the other ones, they were like, ooh, ooh, ooh. And in the end, we moved all of the impacts further out, and we ended up in a more balanced place. So it's just a different way of looking at things and from different angles. And then, of course, comes a hopeless level of honesty, that I say things as they are, and I'm very direct. It doesn't always go down well, but it is a hell of a lot easier. Excuse me, my language.
That's all right. No, I think most people prefer candid conversations. And I know for execs, the thought of having a load of non-execs around the room that you don't know what they're thinking, or you think they might be thinking something and they're not quite saying it, it's also quite disconcerting. So having someone that's actually just really straight up and says,
it's like this,
calls it out.
I think they want it, but I have to say my experiences just tell me that they don't want it all the time. But I can't do sometimes and not other times. It is what it is, right?
Well, and your track record has proven that is valuable to boards, hasn't it, Charlotte?
It seems to work, but I'm sure there's some boards that prefer me not to be there.
When I look at the sort of mix that we have on boards in the UK, I feel like we've had a lot of conversations about the number of women on boards, about the gender mix, about the ethnic diversity of our boards. I haven't heard very many conversations about the neurodiversity of UK boards. Yeah. Do you think this is something that we need to be talking about and thinking about more?
I think we should talk about it and think about it more, because actually I think we do have neurodiverse people on boards, but they might not be aware that they are. Yeah. Because again, board average age of the FTSEs, for example, in the UK is 64. Well, with that average age, let's face it, nobody knew about neurodiversity, you know, even 10 years ago, even now, it's for some people like they've never heard the word before. So there's a lack of awareness. We think neurodiversity, for example, is for younger people. Oh, it's only the under 25. No, they're the only ones who gets diagnosed in school these days. But actually over 25, we're just as many. We just don't know, or society just doesn't know. So whatever number we have under 25, you can triple or quadruple that number to get the real number. We have, for example, in autism, where's the old autistic people? It's like, this is a lifelong, this is how your brain is set up. It doesn't get cured or go away. It is what it is your whole life. So where do old autistic people sit? Where are they now? Let's say you get dementia, for example, and you become more like childlike or more sensitive to things. What do they do with that? And some studies in the US have shown that in closed sort of institutions for older people in the US, 40% are autistic, but they're either heavily sedated or in straitjackets because they're misunderstood. So it's really very important we get some more awareness around this and don't treat people in a way, for example, say, oh, they must have schizophrenia, often a diagnosis that's misplaced, and give you medication for schizophrenia when actually it doesn't work. And they wonder why it doesn't work, because you're not schizophrenic, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, we need a lot more talk about that to get the awareness. When I came out as autistic last year, it was quite a public event. I did it as a campaign to raise money for research. And I was on Sky News and in the Today program and in all the national papers. And I had a lot of people contacting me, hundreds and hundreds of people. A large number of them, other directors, saying to me, I'm also autistic, but I don't publish it because I'm afraid of being discriminated against. So this is why we don't know. So we just had Elon Musk come out as autistic and say that he is. We have more and more high-level people coming out saying, yes, actually, I'm neurodiverse or I'm autistic or whatever it is they are. Even saying I'm dyslexic, people find very difficult, and more difficult if they're successful, it seems, because they feel that it will detract as opposed to add. But if you know someone is neurodiverse, what you generally would know, they have a bigger sort of behind the front window, if you want, is a much bigger space of differences that we're not even focused about. Dyslexia is not just about how you read.
Yeah.
You think differently. You literally think differently, but nobody does research on that or is that interested, because research is driven by allies, not by us. It's driven by parents, for example. And what do parents want? They want a normal child. So the research that is being done is into how do we become more like neurotypicals, which is not what we should be doing. We need to look at the talents that we can draw out. And on boards, I think this is very valuable.
I definitely think about it when people do sometimes talk about diversity of thought now, but actually what we're talking about is diversity of thinking and the process of thinking.
Cognitive diversity. And I think that cognitive diversity, there's enough research coming out now. Professor Simon Baron-Cohen just came out with a book called Pattern Seekers that talks about autistic people, and basically in human cognitive development without systemizers. He calls them pattern seekers and systemizers, and say a lot of these tend to be autistic. And he also says a lot of these tend to have also systemizer parents, because it is very genetic. So it's just putting other words to something else, right? If they hadn't been there throughout humanity to develop a language, get the words down, get it written down, getting all of that, a written language, you need people that are that focused and just focused on that. But you might need someone else around them to feed them and, you know, make sure they've got roof over their heads, because they're actually I'm just creating a language, okay? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Music, mathematics, all of those areas would probably not have happened, according to Professor Baron-Cohen, if we had not had systemizers as part of humanity. So if we eradicate all of us, for example, some groups are looking at genetic cleansing, literally. They're looking into the genes of autism with a view to eradicate that gene. What will that do to humanity? We've been placed here by nature for a reason, right? Why are we not honoring that? Why do we think it's a mistake when there's so many of us? And neurodiverse people are at least 15% of the world population. How is that a mistake?
Yeah, and it's interesting when you look at a lot of leaders and real entrepreneurial pioneers. I know Richard Branson's dyslexic, so you know, when you look at a lot of leaders, how do you you can't unpick what element of their neurodiversity benefited that and what element of it would have been there otherwise, but it's part of them, it's who they are, and surely we benefit from that in society.
I mean, for me, I would say being autistic, I'm feeling pretty sure that that made my career, because it gave me an ability to hyper focus on things I'm interested in.
Yeah.
And so when I was stock exchange trader, I was anything economics, politics, I knew everything, I knew all the numbers, everything I needed to know, and just had that focus. But there were things I was not interested in. I didn't watch general television. I didn't write normal or read normal newspapers. I didn't read ladies' magazines. I just read the FT and I watched the news, and the rest of the time I read about facts. So, you know, obviously, I'm not more intelligent than other people. I think I'm just to have a normal intelligence, but I'm in certain areas very, very focused.
Yeah.
And I seem to have photographic memory, which I only just realized a couple of years ago. So, yeah.
That's amazing.
But if the schools did more in trying to uncover this, we could learn this a lot earlier and use it, right?
And I think, you know, if anyone's watching this with a child that they think may be neurodiverse and hasn't had a diagnosis, then it's, you know, it's a great opportunity for them to be able to recognize that.
It is indeed, and to also support their child in being different. Children that ask more questions and that doesn't follow rules are the ones who will change the world. We need people to follow rules, but they ain't changing the world, right?
Yeah. And particularly, I just keep coming back to it, but when I think about boards, the last thing we want is a bunch of people who think the same way.
That's right. We want people who challenge each other all the time, because it's through being challenged and having disagreements. Disagreements is positive. It's good. That's when we grow. We don't grow without disagreements, right? And I think people forget that as well. They don't like disagreements. Oh, it's an argument. No, it's not an argument. It's just a simple disagreement of opinions. So in the boardroom, we badly need that. We have to have the people that keep being opposite, because that is what gets us having a deeper and richer discussion. So my motto is hire someone who doesn't fit in. Don't try to find someone who fits in with everything else we are already. No, hire someone who doesn't fit in. Get different decades of being born. I mean, we need to bring the younger people onto the table, right?
I couldn't agree with that more, Charlotte. No one talks about age mix on boards, but multi-generational boards will be such a game changer for this country.
Have members in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, and maybe 70s, right? Have that cross. If you go across, yes, it's more complicated to have conversations, but we have so much more knowledge on the board, so much more. Why do we end up all in the 50s or 60s, right? That is the bulk of board members. We need to go at least down to the 40s. When I started as a board member, I was 42. Literally, people were saying to me, oh, you're too young to do this. And I was like, well, you know, I'm here, so, you know, piss off, right? What could I say? It was like, okay, I'm too young. Well, I started work when I was 18. I've worked for 39 years now, right? It's, I think I can hack it, right?
Yeah.
Now I'm 57, it's a lot better. And I think when I turn 60, it will be even better still. That wrinkles and gray hair works well in this environment.
Well, you're not doing too well on that yet then.
You're very kind.
No, well, I became a non-exec when I was 29, so I had some of those conversations as well.
Yeah, it's crazy, right?
And I guess I'm seeing that dialogue shift. I think since we've been advertising roles on dynamic boards, we've got a really good mix. I'd say like some people in their 20s, but a lot in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and some in their 70s. And that really excites me, because I think when people have had that sort of first 10 years of career experience, you know, a lot of the learnings, there's a heck of a lot of research on the learning curves.
It's very steep.
And experience curves, and it's very steep in that first 10 years.
Yeah.
And then it flattens an awful lot.
Well, it also becomes more difficult for us to learn because our elasticity goes down a bit. So I think that when you're younger, you can learn big portions in one. But as you get older, it has to be smaller portions in smaller pieces. Otherwise, your brain can't move with the learning, apparently.
I didn't know that. Charlotte, I want to move on to how you become a great non-exec and a great director. I know this has been a passion of yours for a long time. And when I think about, you know, the role of a non-exec, I know it's really key to be able to ask the right questions in board meetings. And I know you've written a book in this area.
I got this idea 2.5 years ago. Whenever I was out speaking to non-execs and training, it was always the biggest interest I found was in what questions to ask at the end of it, where I said, make sure you ask these questions. And people had a great interest in that. And I thought, why don't we just put that together in a book with different experts adding their questions? So I started this book, 54 different subjects, anything that sort of meets you in the boardroom, with an introduction and then 20 key questions to ask in that area: cybersecurity, board composition, strategy, audit, you know, going concern. We have everything is covered there. And I wanted it to be a tool that the world could really use everywhere. So for all the contributors, we said it has to be written in such a way that it's global governance. It's not UK governance or you know, Danish governance or anything. It's global governance. It's the kind of things that you do on a board, no matter where in the world you are, no matter what kind of organization you're on. So risk management, your cybersecurity concerns, they're all the same, no matter what organization or board you're serving on, right? So it's set up in that way as a top umbrella book, and then we start having books underneath it. But the umbrella book here is open access, which means it's free to download globally. It can also be bought if people want to print it, but obviously the publisher has to charge for that. But we wanted it to be free to download globally so that it was a true global tool, accessible. We have a couple of universities putting it on their required reading list, which is lovely. Henley and Strathclyde so far, for example. So that's great. But we also draw this a true collaboration with these experts that has written each a chapter, which we are totally grateful for.
Yeah, that's brilliant, Charlotte, and a really a good prompt to existing, really helpful for new directors, but also a good prompt to existing directors like me to think through what questions am I forgetting to ask.
Yeah. And you'll be surprised some of it you see. I mean, I was just doing a webinar with Strathclyde University around valuism and where boards are falling short and what questions they need to ask around the broader value, the stakeholder value, how do we create value, from which viewpoint do we create value, if we look at, and who are our ultimate stakeholders? Like in the end of the day, it's all of us in the world, the citizen of the planet, right? Yeah. Because without people on the planet, actually, no organizations will exist. And nobody, I mean, people can't get rich without all of us. And you're thinking, so you have people out there so rich they could literally buy nuclear bombs and kill all of us. Is that right? Is that how does that work, right? That was not possible, say 100 years ago, right? Or 50 years ago, but that is very possible today. Have we considered that? You know, what as leaders, if we as leaders are not asking those kind of questions to say, is that right with the kind of all-killing kind of technology we have today? Yeah. Do we have to be a little bit more mindful around the ability to grow so wealthy because of us?
Mm-hmm. And what sort of boards do you see this being useful for?
So I think that it's for boards to understand the bigger picture with the whole change in sustainability drive and the things. I mean, the pandemic has taught us a lesson, I would hope. It has taught us that we're all one cell, right? We're all part of one cell. Yeah. The virus doesn't care about, you know, borders and boundaries or walls or whatever, oceans even. It goes everywhere. We are all part of that same piece. We can't say, oh, I'm on this island and I don't have to worry about the rest of the world. It's just not how the world works. Yeah. Climate change is for all of us. And climate change in itself might not kill all of us, at least not initially. But what will do it is the social, if you don't have a shift in social behaviors in culture worldwide, when we have less land and continuing to have more people, so we have more people on less land, what does that lead to? Wars over resources. Already now in the beginning, very sort of early post-pandemic boom, we have resources that we are running out of, right? We have resources that are suddenly, you know, if you look at commodity prices and various metals and this, it's becoming scarcer and scarcer. We always knew we would run out of oil, for example. We don't run out of wind and sun, hopefully, right? because if we do, we are all dead.
Very concerning.
Yeah. So boards need to be very clear on this. So when we start on boardrooms deciding on net zero by 2050, or various sustainability goals that we have. So for example, I'm on Langeroot Construction. So as a construction company, so one of the sustainability goals is gender equality and equal access to work. And we have decided that by 2023, we will have 50-50 men and women in that construction company in our almost 6,000 people big workforce. So that's a major shift, and that's only just over 10 years to do that. Yeah. We have also signed up to the net zero 2050. 2050 is far away for net zero, but because net zero tier 3 is all your suppliers has to as well be net zero. Otherwise, you can't be net zero. If we don't start thinking about this now, all boards, right? Because we have a lot of sub-suppliers, and they might be smaller family-owned businesses. If they don't care about their carbon output, then they will lose the work for us as a big group, because actually we need the ones that are net zero, and that will happen over the next 5-10 years. So if the smaller suppliers are not starting to really focus in on this, it will be a problem. So the other thing is, for example, finance. So I'm chairing one of Blackstone's listed companies, which is a loan financing company. And we are pushing to have asked the questions to the companies we finance of what their plans for environmental impact and sustainability impact in general, also on equality, for example. And if they can't satisfy the questions we ask, then maybe they shouldn't have finance. Then they have to go somewhere else and find finance that's significantly more expensive. And that's how the world is going to go, and so on and so on. This is where you can move from the roaring 20s into the depressed 30s into the war in the 40s. That's what we could be looking forward to. I'm sorry, I don't want to sound really negative, but we have to have our eyes wide open, right?
Yeah, and I think, Charlotte, an important part of that is I know that a lot of people have talked to me about the statistics with particularly the FTSE 100 and the contribution that they make to emissions within the UK being so significant, it almost makes it look less significant to the UK SME population that they also look at their emissions and look at their carbon footprint. And I think what you're saying is especially relevant, that actually it's the entire supply chain that's going to need to fix this. So no board member that's sitting there thinking this is irrelevant for me.
It's relevant for everyone, because everyone needs clients. I mean, so my daughter, she's 17, right? There is a bikini brand that she loves. She really, really would love to have it. But she said, I simply can't buy it because they're not developing them sustainably. So her and her friends are just like dishing that, even though it's gorgeous and they really want it. But their ethical values and what they live by comes over and above the wanting to look fancy in a bikini. I love that, right? And that's what the younger generation is driving. And that's why we need them on the boards as well, to tell all the board members exactly that. Like, she loves Nutella, but she won't have it because it has palm oil in it.
Palm oil,
right?
yeah.
So all of these kind of things, I think are just incredibly important to be very clear on. Television companies, I mean, I have reverse mentors. I have young people mentoring me all the time, so I learn from them. None of them are going to buy television in their house, right? Do television companies do that?
We've got just behind us a really small projector.
Yeah.
We don't have a television.
No, I mean, do television companies know that? Have they stopped producing televisions? Or have they reduced it? Are they very clear? What is the lack of that understanding from the board level of television producing companies? Right? Do you see what I mean? It's this lag. If you don't have board members on the forefront, putting in the questions, being challenging, then it can be difficult. The executives should rely on the board to give them this up-to-date information and knowledge from all the other industries they're involved. It's not, you don't just come in and eat the sandwiches. It's simply not good enough if you do that, right?
Totally true. And I think one of the things we've heard, I think it was Tony Simpson said it last year, he said, for those who through the COVID period have suddenly realized that the social aspect has gone in some respects, like, there's no dinner, there's no sandwiches. Yeah. It's weeding out some of the directors that were there for the wrong reasons.
That's right.
It's now back to the core substance of what the role is.
Yeah, you're there to put in your brain and your insights and your knowledge and your expertise, and that needs to be the core reason for being. I mean, for me, the dinners are not super important, but time out of the boardroom is important, right? And it's very important to have that. But I guess me being autistic, I'm really comfortable, with this, as well as meeting people. It doesn't. Some people really need that social aspect badly. I need it less so, but I can see the value of it, and how we can feel each other when we're in the same room in a different way through our energies. You always know something about people that you don't know why you know, but you just know it. We all have these senses. And I guess maybe, in my view, I think neurodiverse people tend to have a broader sensory band. So, for example, when we're young, we might not be so happy to look into people's eyes, and we get like forced to look into people's eyes, but actually the eyes are the gateway to the soul, right? And this is again something nobody has done research in. What do they think we see when we look into someone's eyes? Is anyone interested in knowing what we see? Because I think we see a lot more. And that's why we shy away from doing it, because we know that it's a gateway to see a lot of things. And we don't always want to have that right in front of us when we are thinking of what are we going to say, right? And also, why do we want to bare ourselves to someone in front of us we don't trust? Because it's like, when you really look into people's eyes, you're naked. But some people don't get that.
And I wonder how different that is when you're on Zoom or Teams or whatever, looking at people this way.
It's very hard, because you don't get that. You get that when you're right in front of, because there's no filter. You have the full, and you can at the same time also feel their energies. I mean, people feel so for me, I was relentlessly bullied as a child by people I didn't even know. I was virtually nonverbal till I was 12, by choice or not by choice. I just didn't like talking at all. So it was kind of choice. It's not that I couldn't, but it was just not safe to do that. So I was always silent. And I got like beaten by boys older than myself who didn't even know me for reasons I never understood. I asked my sister, do I bully me on my forehead? But what it is, they could feel it, right? They could feel that I was different and therefore needed to be beaten up. And that's what we do with differences as human species. And it happens in boardrooms as well, right? And that's why it's so difficult to diversify the boardrooms, because the instinct is that we don't like differences. Xenophobia, as they call it, is really quite widespread. And undiverse boards clearly suffer from that. But it's not something we talk so much about. And it's not something that I'm super popular for saying. But why are we afraid of differences? What is the concern? Why are you so scared if someone has a different color of skin? Because it is fear that is holding that away, right? And we need to develop ourselves more. So I look a lot into vertical leadership development. So horizontal, you have knowledge, you can learn as much as you want, but doesn't mean you get any self-insight. So the vertical piece is the self-insight and the growing from within, which is the only place to grow from, right? So in the world, there's said to be around 7 levels. This is very old. They started working on this back in the 50s, built on sort of Maslow pyramid of needs. But above that, it's what is the cognitive development of people as they mature, but also some people just operate at level 1, 2, 3, or colors sort of based to red, yellow, orange. And then the level sort of 5, 4, 5, 6 is more green, turquoise, blue. And then the top level is sort of purple. And it's based on something called spiral dynamics. And that shows that in society, we have all these different levels we operate at. At level 1, 2, 3 is about 80% of the world population is at those levels. But within those levels, you don't easily understand diversity or equality. You don't own it in your heart. You have to keep asking why. Yeah. So when you have to keep asking, why should we be diverse? Or I don't want that kind of, that's level 1, 2, 3, or red, yellow, orange. And you simply can't get those people to move beyond from that. But the millennials, interesting and younger, come in at level 4. So they come in at, the blue and green and turquoise, which means that they don't even ask why. They just ask, how do we make it happen, right? So you move from asking, why are we doing this, to how can we make it equal? How can we make society equal? How can we look after the environment? How can we? But for people who operate at level 1, 2, 3, cognitively, they are simply not developed to understand why we need to do this. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
That is why we're not moving further towards climate change and changing the environment and changing the planet, have more equality. Look at the pandemic. So what have we done in the pandemic to help the entire planetarian citizens, right? We haven't, is the answer. We're here, here in the UK, we've got 80% of vaccinations, of people vaccinated by now. And in the US, great. There are countries where there's 0, right? This is a pandemic. What about pandemic do we not understand, right? So we might be vaccinated here. Well, why don't we can sit on our little island, or not a little island, we sit on an island, not have anyone coming in or out, right? Not use any resources from other places of the world, because it's still raging. So I speak to countries in Africa, they have no vaccinations. Look at India, it's dire, right?
Yeah.
What are we doing to help? So we're sitting here saying we should be ashamed. We should be ashamed to say we have 80% when some have 0. So I posted this on LinkedIn the other day, just to say, can you just all look at the percentages that different countries have? Worldwide, we are below 20%. If we think we're out of the pandemic, we are more naive than we should be allowed to be. Boards has got to think about this, because they cannot just say, now we're open for business, hallelujah, let's all go and have drinks together again. It's just not how it works. You can't start flying around freely. You can't have goods moving freely. You can't take workers from different places of the world, right? And you won't be able to do so for at least another year or 2. End of. It's not rocket science. Why can't people see it? I'm so surprised, right?
Yeah, I think it's with the pandemic and with climate change. It's the first time there's been a real live challenge on thinking as a global citizen.
That's right.
And so I think people have got their heads around that. And when I think of things in corporate governance like Section 172 and the need to think about multiple stakeholders, it talks about the environment, but it doesn't quite say global citizens. People,
all the people
live around the world, and how what you're doing impacts that.
Company. I know, it's crazy, right? But it literally is having a global mindset and thinking in that global way. Just somehow people just struggle with. Fine, we can't expect everybody to be able to do the same. But if you call yourself a leader and you struggle with that, you better go and get some development going, right? Because otherwise, we won't move forward fast enough. And then the millennials and younger will also come in, and at some stage within the next 5 to 10 years, we'll have major generational clashes.
Yeah.
And we have to, my generation and older, we've got to move aside, give the chair to the younger people, be behind with our knowledge and experience and support them, but put them in the decision-making seat. I'm in a minority on this one now still.
I think you are.
Hopefully you won't stay that way.
But I think I like your idea of some stepping back, but actually for me, it's look, how can we do multi-generational boards? How can we collaborate quicker? Because when I look at the UK and the way we have hubs of hotspots of tech, of innovation, it is that skill set is not shared across the country. Yeah. And for me, non-exec roles are an incredible way that we can do that. We could do that quickly. Because if you look at where that talent is and the age group that holds a lot of that talent and skill base, those individuals, and if you're watching this and you're thinking you're one of those, then be challenged. Those individuals could be on the boards of UK SMEs, of public sector organisations, of a whole mix of organisations all across the country. And that would be the best collaborative, intergenerational working and sharing of skills that we've ever seen if we could make that happen.
That's right. I mean, we've got millions of companies in the UK, right? So we could find at least 1 million boards that could help develop these board members in a year. I mean, this is what I did Board Apprentice for, right? Board Apprentice was basically set up to say to the boards, okay, we have to, as boards, develop new board members. Because the only way you can learn what goes on a board is by being on a board, right? I mean, you can read books about it, but it's just not the same. So if we got 1 million boards to say, okay, we reserve a seat at the table for someone different, younger or whatever, then within a year we had 1 million developed board members. I mean, again, not rocket science, not difficult. We set up a social franchise, come and get it, right? It doesn't cost anything. I mean, it's like, how many tools can we give the world for free? Before people actually start It's almost like sometimes they want reassuringly expensive. But that's
we
not how I
often wonder about that, because we're a lot cheaper than going down other routes sometimes. So they rather we were reassuringly expensive.
It's like, yeah, that's not smart.
Charlotte, we should probably wrap up soon, but just one final question. If someone's watching this and they feel like they are someone different, whether they are neurodiverse or they bring another form of difference to a board role, what would your message be for them?
Well, so certainly get onto those boards, right? But how to do it? So the two initiatives I have started is one, Board Apprentice, boardapprentice.com, which is a not-for-profit that is doing this around the world. We're on 3 different continents now. We just launched in Africa, and we're in Caribbean and in Europe as well. And the other one for neurodiverse individuals, I'm launching an Institute of Neurodiversity. It will be domiciled in Switzerland because they are neutral for the world, and it's a global piece as well, where we can develop a voice for neurodiverse people. We've got LinkedIn pages called Impact of Neurodiversity, ION is what we call it, and Facebook pages, and we are aiming to launch in October for real, basically for neurodiverse individuals and our allies. And hopefully one day everybody will be our allies and we won't be needed anymore.
That's brilliant, Charlotte. Thank you. And anyone watching this that's thinking about board roles, please do sign up to Dynamic Boards. It's totally free, and we've generally got between 50 and sort of 100 board roles live at any one time. So please do have a look. And as Charlotte said, particularly if you know that you're going to bring difference to boards, then just have a look, have an apply, see what happens.
Obviously, we tell all our board apprentices to sign up to Dynamic Boards because that's where they can see positions that they should apply to. If you don't apply, you don't get.
Yes.
Just wait for someone to tap your shoulder. Be out there, push it.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you, Charlotte.
My pleasure.
Take care.